All right. Okay, welcome to another movie review stream. My name is Mark McPherson, film critic for movieswithmark.com, filminquiry.com, and twincitiesgeek.com. So, we're in July, and this is the big weekend that everyone's been waiting for, the biggest double feature of July. So, of course, we'll be talking about Greta Gerwig's new film Barbie, of course, based on the popular toy, and Christopher Nolan's Oppenheimer, of course, based on the historical figure of the father of the atomic bomb. And as a little bonus, just because I always like to review like 3 things on the stream, usually, sometimes more than others, I decided to also take a look at the documentary Rock Hudson, All That Heaven Allows. A look back on the life of actor Rock Hudson, who unfortunately had to closet his homosexuality for much of his life and had a tragic end in the 80s. But before we get to that much of a downer, I guess we'll go like from the top. I just go through, like the nicer one. We'll go to the chipper one that most people are probably going to see. They're probably going to be going to see Barbie. Okay, let's get up my notes here. So I got this. I got the cast list here, and we will talk about this new toy movie that might surprise some people. Maybe. We'll see. All right. Let me get the cast list up here. See if I got everybody. And yeah. Okay. All right. In 3, 2, 1. So the Barbie movie is not quite what I was expecting. You look at like the trailers and how it's set up, and it looks like just going to be like, like a fun little, Barbie goes to the real world type of adventure, a la Masters of the Universe, stuff like that. But thankfully, it's not quite that. It's more, it more relates to, who's in charge of making this film, because you have Greta Gerwig coming in to direct, and you have Noah Baumbach as the co-writer on the script. And it definitely does feel like a Greta Gerwig film and a Noah Baumbach film. It doesn't feel like, like a Disney project where they just bring in a prolific director and they more or less play ball and they end up churning out something bland with the product there. Barbie's much different because they definitely let Gerwig and Baumbach kind of make it their type of film. It has all the hallmarks that you expect. It has the kind of like overt feminist messaging that Greta Gerwig's films usually have, and it has the existential dread that usually permeates through a lot of Baumbach's work. And I gotta say, I was not expecting to see that in the Barbie movie. I was expecting maybe I'd see like little bits and pieces of it here and there that gets strewn about with like a safe adventure and fantasy, but no, it's actually not. This is, I think a lot of people are probably going to bring this up. This is a film with teeth. This is a film that actually gets pretty deep into what it wants to talk about with Barbie, beyond just, referencing all the toys and, having like an imagination and an imaginative and colorful world with the character. There's something more to this film, and I think I love how like it never slows down too much to explain how all this works. Like, we open up on Barbie Land, which we learned is like adjacent to reality, and they have stereotypical Barbie in this world. Who's played by Margot Robbie. She's referred to as stereotypical Barbie because pretty much all the women in Barbie Land are named Barbie. With the exception of a few. Like they have like Midge is there, and I believe like Skipper's there as well. But yeah, so Barbie lives this prim and proper life where it's just like, it's like a world where like the imagination comes to life, kind of like, like the Lego movie, in which, you're embodying this reality that's actually, more or less the mind of a child. And if you're hoping for a concrete explanation of why this is in the film, you won't get much of one. And I love that. I love that they don't really get into the weeds of it. They let it progress. Because yeah, it's a weird and colorful world, and characters speak very matter-of-factly about what a utopia it is they live in, where they don't have any worries, and they don't have to worry about dying or money or politics or, conforming specifically, to a societal expectation. Except it kind of does linger there. And it's embodied a bit with how Barbie interacts with Ken, played by Ryan Gosling, who always the way that the film describes it, it's just like Ken exists solely so that Barbie will notice him. So you can tell that it's weird. It's a utopia that something is clearly wrong here. And Barbie soon figures it out when she starts having thoughts of death that just pop into her mind. And in order to get over this, she later realizes that she has to go into the real world to track down answers. I won't go too much into it because there's a little bit of like a twist with how they reveal this, but what it essentially is, it's more or less Barbie's mission to kind of like not just accept like her utopian hideaway and just bury her head in the sand, but also just that she wants to have more or less mortality. Like I don't want to quite boil it down to just being that. Like it's not like just Barbie wants to be human, like it's like mannequin or whatever. It's not quite that simple, but it does proceed down that route. And I love the fact that it doesn't make it that rigid, and it kind of plays fast and loose with the material here. Because Barbie Land's supposed to be like weird and imaginative, but parts of the Los Angeles reality that she goes into is also a little bit ridiculous as well. But probably the most ridiculous place that she visits is the actual company of Mattel, in which the CEO, played by Will Ferrell, who's just tripping all over himself, both figuratively and literally, trying to, stress that he's an ally, but like but they mock the fact that he's like a corporate ally, like he's trying to seem like, he's pushing like the feminist messaging with Barbie, but at the same time, he's only really doing it for money. So they're very upfront with it, even though like it's mostly just Will Ferrell playing what you expect with him in this role. But it feels like this film could get very cynical very quick, and it kind of does at some points, because there's a lot of the humor is very like kind of like in the same vein of like the Lego Movie, where it's like they're aware of the problems and the weirdness of reality and Barbie Land itself. And Barbie herself will have occasional moments where she'll like point out like something, culturally significant, or aspects of, aspects of society that you would not expect her to point out in a very analytical manner. The way that I would kind of describe it is that like, like when characters will have like that one burst of brilliance where they keep, just saying stupid stuff and then they surprise you with something highly intelligent. There's a lot of those scenes in here with Barbie. And honestly, it would be a bit that would grow old if it weren't for the fact that like it's very astute, and it approaches this material in a much more mature manner than I would expect. Mostly just because like it finds a good balance of trying to be like blunt and overt with what it's trying to stress here, because it's a film about, challenging gender norms and, questioning what it means to not so much like grow up, but, what it means like to address reality. And it's not like one of those things where it's like Barbie's like, oh, reality sucks and I don't want to grow up. It's more or less about like recognizing the stresses and problems that come with women, and learning to not just accept them, but try to like, rise up and, try to, be more of like a whole person. And I think one of the more surprising things with this too is that trying to find like a more complete self outside of gender norms also applies to Ken in this movie as well. Like there's a lot of moments in here where you think Ken is just like the dumb guy who's going to wreck everything, and the way that the film sets him up and what he experiences in reality and what he takes with him back to Barbie Land, it could have easily set him up as a simplistic villain. But they don't make him that simple. Like they make all like the simple jokes that you would make with Ken in this type of scenario, but they also give him agency, because it's not just a matter of of just trying to like topple like the patriarchy, even though that does become like a big thing that it feels like Barbie has to conquer. But it's a war that she wins not so much through just defeating it, but having empathy and recognizing the agency in people when they feel like they have to conform to gender norms. So it was honestly surprising to see this aspect in the film, especially the climax as well. Like the second to last scenes here is actually pretty profound and actually like kind of sad when you think about it too. But in like that, kind of, like, I don't quite want to say like transcendent, but like, a means of like accepting what it is to be human and what it is like, to be a woman, and the way that it embraces it. And has like some surprisingly good dialogue towards the end there. It really works out well. But of course, the way that the film is pitched, a lot of people are like, but is it really this heavy throughout? It's like, yeah, kind of. Like I said, it's very blunt and overt with what it's trying to say here. And there's a few times where you're just kind of like, oh, okay, I understand you're trying to boil this down a little bit more so that nobody will miss the messaging here. And it does, I will say, even for like this aspect of the film where it's trying to hammer home these points hard, there are a lot of moments where I just like broke out laughing at this, especially at one point where they compare toxic masculinity to being obsessed with Zack Snyder's cut of Justice League, which I like that joke has teeth because it doesn't like kind of like swim around the joke. It dives head first right into it. Which is great with like a lot of the humor. Like, and it's very knowing comedy as well. Like they bring up like, like they show like the weird plastic world and how they address Barbie's many professions and all the outfits, which it feels like they get their own introduction at certain points, which is cute. But there's also like the great meta nature to it is so brilliant because it allows like Helen Mirren, who does the narration in this film, to kind of like butt in and provide extra commentary. Because it feels like Helen Mirren would just be there to give like a little bit of dignity to their narration, but then she jabs into the film as well. Like at one point she cuts off one scene at just the right moment to say, if this is the theme that they were trying to stress in the film, this casting's a little bit wrong here. Which is perfectly timed because it's a moment where like Margot Robbie says like, I've kind of like done damage to the feminist movement and I'm hideous. And then Helen Mirren butts is like, wait. You're going to say this with Margot Robbie. I won't reveal too much more like the gags, just because they're so brilliant. They're very much on the nose, but they're, a lot of people, I imagine a lot of people are going to have this criticism of the film where like they're going to say it's very on the nose and it's very blunt and there's not so much subtlety, which is not a problem for myself, just because another way of looking at it as looking at a film which is on the nose is to look at it and say it was very on target. And there's no missing what this film is trying to say and what it's trying to stress. Like it does kind of phone in some of like the outsider messages that it wants to, not quite outsiders, not the right word, like more of like the extra issues it wants to address. Like at one point Barbie gets a savage critique where it delves into aspects of like how like feminism has been packaged and sold. It goes a little bit off the rails at that point when the person criticizing her goes into calling her a fascist for what she's pushing in there. So it kind of bogs it down through there. Like there are a few lines where it's just kind of trying to be a little bit too blunt to kind of give you kind of like a pint-sized version of the themes they're trying to say. Like look, here's all the stuff we're packing in, and we don't have a lot of room for this. So like here's this one little scene or this one little line that's going to suffice for what it's trying to push. But in terms of how the film looks, it's gorgeous. I mean, aside from just like Barbie Land, just the way that they film her, all the outfits, all the wild, outlandish, and dated colors. There's one scene in particular when Ken has like a dance-off, which transports them to seemingly to like another world, which feels like straight out of something like Singing in the Rain. And in fact, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people who are probably going to do like a side-by-side to see how much it reflects the staging of like Singing in the Rain, right? Like, the sequence where they're dancing and then it kind of goes off into like this empty and vast and colorful stage. Like there's a great sequence for that when Ken is battling with his rival Ken. Was it Ken? I think it was Ken number 2, played by Simu Liu. And it's just it's a wondrous sight. Like it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous, but it's meaningful. It doesn't feel like it's just there. Like, oh, here's the musical sequence and here's this cute little number here. It feels like all the stuff they're building up with Barbie here is amounting to, like the conflict between Barbie and Ken and trying to find their place in the world. Because like it's a PG-13 Barbie film, and of course, the obvious joke that everyone makes with Barbie and Ken is that, Barbie doesn't have a vagina and Ken doesn't have a penis. And Yeah, the film does make that joke, but it doesn't rely on like, like the simplistic gags that you would have with Barbie being a fish out of water. And I think what makes this type of film work is like I said, the maturity of it. There's one scene that I loved very early on in the film where Barbie is just trying to get her bearings in this world and trying to figure it out. And, having lived this life where everyone was happy and chipper and didn't have any worries in the world, there's this moment where she's just sitting in a park, or at least like park adjacent, and she's watching everybody and she's seeing like people laugh, she's seeing people cry, she's seeing kids play, and she's just taking in all these emotions. And then she turns to the woman next to her, next to her, who's this very old woman, and she just smiles at her and says, "Wow, you're beautiful." And not like in, like an insulting way where she would like take it the wrong way and she wouldn't like connect with the person, but in a manner where it's just like, like she says it with sincerity that the old woman gets it. And it's just, it's a beautiful moment of just like connection and accepting all like the joys and the stresses that come with being human and woman in this world. And it's such a surprising moment. There's a lot of surprising moments in this film where you feel like it could just fall back and just being, Barbie's a fish out of water. And there's a lot of scenes where it could set up for that, but it kind of breezes over them. Like I said, similar to like the Barbie and Ken with the genitals joke, they smooth over that really quick. And no pun intended with that. I'm sure they do a few more genital jokes, but not enough where you're just like, okay, can you lay off it? Yes, I had a Barbie when I was young, and I undressed it. I get the gag. All right? It doesn't water it down. And I think, just because there's a good balance here where it feels like a film like this has freedom where it can experiment, like I said, with those like slower moments and also the more lavish musical numbers and the weird world, and having Lizzo on the soundtrack where she does the same thing as Helen Mirren. She actually talks back. In fact, I think she actually talks back directly to Helen Mirren saying, "Don't talk over my song." So yeah, it works on a lot of levels. There's meta nature, there's the overt feminist angle, which isn't just it's not in like the paddling pool of feminism where it's just kind of like, okay, here's a little bit of like girl bossness that's going to be tossed into the picture, and we're not really going to develop it anymore past that. It actually feels like it's trying to capitalize on something here, while at the same time trying to have fun with the material and just like it's sad but a lot of fun and ridiculous at the same time. There's a great little cutaway gag where they address a different type of Barbie who specifically watches like the best version of Pride and Prejudice, which is the BBC version, which they do show in the film. There's a lot of like laugh out loud moments in addition to moments that are surprisingly poignant and cute. So I wasn't exactly expecting a Barbie film to have this much teeth, but I was delightfully surprised. It's not often that you expect a summer film like this to have, as much like allure in its beauty as much as it has like brains and like a solid script, which just, just having like that perfect combination of just like great staging and a theme that it's trying to stress and says it beautifully and loudly and doesn't just kind of like try to play it safe. Like, this film doesn't play it safe. It does have that viciousness and that bite to it. Maybe a little bit, like I said, a lot of people are going to say it's on the nose, and there are a few scenes just kind of like, okay, like, the little pint-sized moments. I get it, what you're trying to do here, but, I'd like it if you developed more on the central theme that you're going for here, more than just these little ones. And there are a few scenes where they do kind of fall flat. Like, there's a scene where Barbie's trying to escape through Mattel, and there's a big chase scene, and it's diced up in a way where, like, it just... I'm sure, like, the way that they were shooting it, it looked fun, but the way that they edited it, like, I wasn't quite vibing with it. I wasn't quite having the level of fun that I was expecting with it. Mostly because it feels like Will Ferrell was trying to... there were a few Will Ferrell improv moments where, like, he's trying to find the funny stuff with the material, but it's not quite there. Like it's not like a gag that falls flat. It's just kind of like, okay, he's trying to find some fun stuff here, but it's not quite hitting. But these are like minor nitpicks aside. Like in terms of like the film as a whole, it goes to places I did not expect for a summer Barbie movie. And considering that my expectations for a Barbie movie are pretty low, it was incredibly surprising to see a film like this, which is bold, which isn't afraid, which goes to areas that you would not expect. But I mean, I think like the PG-13 rating helped with that. But yeah, it's definitely not just a Barbie movie. It feels like a Greta Gerwig film and a Noah Baumbach script, and it's absolutely wonderful. So yeah, Barbie is currently playing in theaters tonight and will be playing through the weekend. So if you get a chance, go watch it. Although I doubt I have to tell anyone. I'm sure the film's going to make a ton of money this weekend. So let's get to the other film that it will be in competition with this weekend. Of course, we are talking about Oppenheimer. The second equation of the... what's it? The Barbenheimer equation? All right, let's get the notes up here. Because, my God, this is a huge cast. I had to actually look up some of the casting here, too, because some of it, like, caught me off guard. Like, I don't know how much of a spoiler this will be, but, like, you know, Gary Oldman's in the film as the president, and that kind of caught me off guard. There was another one I was thinking of. What was it? It was, what's his name? I recognize Jason Clarke, but who was... There was another person who only had, like, a minor role, but, like, he sticks out. It's, oh, God, I'm blanking on his name here. I'm blanking... Hang on, I gotta look this up, otherwise I'm going to regret it. God, there's such a huge cast list. Wasn't it? He's in Star Trek Lower Decks. He's in The Boys. His name's on the tip of my tongue. I swear I'm going to... Jack Quaid. Jack Quaid was in this film. He doesn't do as much. He does a bit more than the other actors. He's been in it more frequently, but it was surprising to see him. I guess the one thing I should mention is that Michael Caine is not in this film. They couldn't wedge a British guy into this one, so Caine's streak with Nolan's movies is struck out with this one. In case, just in case anyone was going to the theater and hoping he would be there. Okay, let's see. Get all the notes assembled here. Okay. I'm just trying to make sure I have all, like, the casting notes here. Because, good gravy. Too many. Okay. Alright. So here we go in 3, 2, 1. So Christopher Nolan's Oppenheimer is probably his most divergent film, in terms of like the type of film that he's making here, because I think what a lot of people might not know going into this film is that it's mostly, for the most part, it's a courtroom drama, which I found very fascinating. It's like it's a 3-hour courtroom drama in which they kind of market it on the fact that like the big scene is going to be when like the bomb drops and Julius Oppenheimer's atomic bomb comes to life. Like that's going to be like the crowning achievement of the film. The interesting thing, I think, and I don't know how much of a spoiler this will be for you, but the big explosion is just like, it's for the second act. It's directly in the middle of the film, and the real meat of the picture, besides just the visual splendor, is everything that surrounds the development of the atomic bomb and and how Oppenheimer deals with it after the fact. And it's the film, the way that the film goes about it, like Nolan makes this picture hit the ground running. Like we're not really given too much of an introduction to Julius, who's played by Cillian Murphy, who does like I mean like there's a lot of great talent in this film, but Cillian Murphy really makes this role work, and there's a lot for him to work with here. Like he has to go through like a ton of emotions, a ton of different years for this character, and many different like feelings of anxiety and pressures, and just, you know, feeling empty and hollow at the same time, feeling dread and discomfort and fear and just sadness for like the sins that he's been given here, which honestly, in terms of like all of Christopher Nolan's films, like this is probably the one with the most meat, because it usually feels like the characters are usually just present to fulfill, you know, like not quite like surface level emotions, but they're more or less there for action. Because the way that I've usually referred to Christopher Nolan's films is that they're like the thinking man's Michael Bay movie, where like like the films are about just, you know, stuff blowing up and action. But there's actually like a little bit of like, you know, like some smarts behind it, and there's actually some pretty good writing and solid themes that are established, and just general good filmmaking, as opposed to, you know, Michael Bay's like weird shaky camera work. And like looking at Oppenheimer, it's like it's one of those things where it's just like, you know, usually it feels like the smarts take like a back seat and they kind of have to catch up with the rest of the action here. And here it feels like it's the opposite. It feels like the intensity of like the bomb dropping is kind of like, you know, more or less like the frosting, and not so much like the, you know, the cake, if you will, of what is here. Because like the most exciting scenes in the film are not when the bomb drops. Like, don't get me wrong, it's a cool scene when you finally get to see all of Oppenheimer's work come together, and he kind of witnesses this horrific sight, which I love the way that they stage it with, like, you know, letting like the sound drop, because of like, you know, how, you know, an explosion in the distance, you know, like it will take a while for like it to carry. So there's this great moment where you just get to observe the fire and just hear Oppenheimer's breath as like the silence overtakes him at witnessing like the horrors that he's created of launching into the nuclear era. It's a good scene. It's very much a good scene. It's not like, you know, like, oh, here's, you know, like the dud of a scene. But the real meat of the picture is where you get to see the conflict that he faces with, you know, dealing with his affairs, both political and sexual, you know, like coming to terms with the terrors that he's unleashed, just the anxiety that courses through his mind, and just all these scenes work so well that it's just like, you know, like the bomb dropping is cool. It's nice, and it'll probably like wake up the audience who's probably expecting a much different film and probably won't be able to stay awake through so much of the dialogue. But yeah, like it does this thing that a lot of films do, where they try to make these eureka moments of like science more exciting and more vibrant. I was thinking back to like there's a film from a few years ago called Radioactive, which was, you know, looking at like the history of Madame Curie, and it tried to stage like these visual elements to make like the discoveries more exciting. Like you could see like the lightning striking in the brain and all that. There are a few scenes like that in this film where Nolan tries to make these, you know, let us inside Oppenheimer's head, and you get to see like his thoughts about, you know, like the atom splitting and particles, and you know, like the mechanics of stars and light and physics, and try to make it both like bold and vibrant, like it's some like, you know, sinister superpower that he's unleashed. It doesn't do too much of that though. Like I was kind of, you know, like the film starts off with that. Like you get to see Oppenheimer when he's just starting out in his career and kind of rising through the ranks, and, you know, going to university and kind of rising up through there. And it has a lot of those visuals. And I thought, okay, is this going to be the whole film? Is it just going to be like, you know, Oppenheimer talking about like particles, and it's going to like do a quick cut to like a little bit of like, you know, the loud sound and the, you know, and like the visual effects of, you know, like of, you know, like of the atom and stuff like that. there's a tiny bit of that, but it's not reliant on it. Because what the film is reliant on is is the very quick pacing here and the fast dialogue here. Like the film does not slow down for explaining everything here. Like it immediately jumps into Louis Strauss trying to get the jump on Oppenheimer. Louis Strauss is played by Robert Downey Jr. and he does a fantastic job just melting into this role of this guy who clearly has it out for Oppenheimer, and just the moment that he suspects that, you know, he has communist leanings, he just jumps onto it immediately. And I love the fact, like, he more or less becomes like a bookend for the film, because like he has a fragile ego. He takes it upon himself. Like, he really doesn't like the way that kind of Oppenheimer's framed him in front of like Albert Einstein. So kind of has it out for him. And I like the way that it's framed too. Like every scene with Strauss specifically is filmed in black and white. Like anytime like he's like the central focus of the film, and he's and he's like talking about Oppenheimer and even having like flashbacks, it's all in black and white. Which is actually like a little interesting tech note here, is that a lot of the film was shot in IMAX. And Nolan actually wanted to shoot like the black and white scenes in black and white with the camera, like not as like a post-production effect, like, you know how, you know, like other films are like, here's the black and white edition. In fact, I think over on the Criterion channel they're doing like a Johnny Mnemonic in black and white. No, here it's actually Nolan specifically wanted to shoot IMAX black and white, which has never been done before. So, you know, you want to look at, you know, what trailblazing techniques that Nolan's using here. It's probably in the black and white. And it's fascinating that he would choose, you know, kind of like a courtroom drama. Kinda. It's kind of a courtroom drama. Like we do visit like the test site, and we get to see the explosion. We do venture around the world to different sections, but most of the film is usually in indoor settings, you know, behind like basically like Oppenheimer or Strauss sitting before a committee that's judging him. And it honestly kind of works. Like, I think in the first act, the film kind of like, I don't quite want to say stumbles, but it does go all over the place, where it demands you keep up with it. Like, look, we're not going to slow down. We're not going to explain much of these characters. Like, we're going to introduce, like, you know, Catherine Oppenheimer, played by Emily Blunt, when she comes in, but we're not going to, you know, like, we're going to like go right into the marriage. We're going to, like, you know, it does that thing that a lot of biographical dramas do, where they skip over a lot of stuff to get to the meat of the film. And thankfully, like, because the film is 3 hours long, it's Nolan's longest film to date. It does feel like you get to cover a lot of bases here, which you kind of want to do, because you know, for a film that's specifically about Oppenheimer, you want to look at him from a lot of different angles, and you get to see, like, you know, his political beliefs, you know, his interest in, you know, his interest in different women, you know, his problems with women, his inability to connect, his inability to think about the bigger picture, and his dread with realizing what he's about to unleash on the world. And I want to go back to, like, when I said, like, how, like, Nolan tries to find ways to make ways to find you know, certain scenes to be more exciting when they could just be people talking. There are a few moments like that. In particular, I want to bring this up, like, because a lot of people are going to be talking about it. The film's rated R, and there are some sex scenes in it, and the sex scenes are kind of fascinating because they don't feel like standard. They feel like they hold some importance here, because specifically there are two, I believe there might be more, but there's two sex scenes that come to mind. There's the first sex scene, I believe with I believe it's with Catherine. I believe there is one sex scene where, you know, like, where Oppenheimer first utters the words, you know, "I have become death, destroyer of worlds." You know, like the scene, the moment you're expecting to say that, he says it during a sex scene, and it comes up again during during like kind of like the grilling for like, trying to see if he has communist leanings to try to like, try to like discredit Oppenheimer. There's a moment where he's forced to admit that he did have a sexual affair, and the way that I don't quite want to spoil it, but it's one of the most bizarre scenes. One of the most bizarre and surreal ways to like to shoot a sex scene at that moment. And the fact that it's shot in IMAX is just it's just all the better. So there's a lot of ground that's broken here. Outside of that, in terms of the horrors that Oppenheimer feels here, I love the fact that the film tries to keep it central to just his, more or less to Oppenheimer's perspective. Like we don't see the moment where the bomb specifically drops on Japan. We do see, however, the imagination within Oppenheimer about imagining the death that he's unleashed. So you get to see like his, more or less his imagination about how, experiencing like the light from the blast and remembering it and having it echo in the background and kind of like seeing aspects of like the dead bodies that he's, kind of amassed with this. And so like you do feel like the guilt that he has with this. But I kind of want to stress this because I feel like some people might not get this with how the film is framed. The film is not trying to frame Oppenheimer as this kind of like either misunderstood genius or a guy who fully understood, the horrible things that he's done. Like there's a great moment in here where he confesses his sin about, having slept with a woman and that with another woman who's not his wife at the time. And then and then after like, that woman kind of like kills herself, he kind of like tries to like admit to himself, like, oh God, this is horrible. Why did I do this? And he doesn't receive sympathy at that moment. When he confesses the truth, he gets the punishment that he deserves here. Like there isn't a moment where it's just kind of like, oh, poor Oppenheimer. Oh, he didn't deserve this. There are moments where you're just kind of like, yeah, he should feel bad about what he's done, from having sexual affairs to being responsible for dropping an atomic bomb. And it's like, and it's one of those things where it's just like, all the warning signs were there because there's other physicists who stress, problems with, working with the military and not feeling comfortable about it. And also not being comfortable with the fact that Oppenheimer has not considered all the angles here and the atrocities that he's about to unleash on the world, that they just won't go forward. Like they give him little warnings, like you don't want to go down this route. You know what's going to happen if you do this, and he does it anyway because he feels like, this is like the progress I've made, and if I don't finish this, someone else is going to. So in a way, like he tries to rationalize it by thinking like he's kind of going to martyr himself by saying like, look, we'll develop it first. And if we show the horrors of the atomic bomb, it'll end the war and everything will be fine. And then the moment that he does the first test, all those like, those rationales wash away. And that's the moment where once he sees those bombs being shipped off, it's like, oh God, what have I done? I've ruined the world with what I'm about to do here. I got blood on my hands. And yeah, and you feel like that dread and that horrible icky feeling, in the pit of your stomach, like if you were responsible for something like this. And even when like the film like goes into, just Oppenheimer imagining a world consumed by nukes and fire, which is like his greatest fear, and which had a certain probability of happening where, if they did develop this nuke, that it was going to blow up the world. Yeah, you feel that way, like especially by like the final scene in the film, which kind of like culminates with like his talk with Albert Einstein. There's this overwhelming sense of dread that just washes over you in that moment, and it's just like, it's like the perfect way to cap out this film, where you're not just coming to watch the giant explosion, go, oh cool, look at what Oppenheimer made. You're meant to feel like, oh man, Oppenheimer developed something really horrible that's going to affect the world for decades to come, and it's just going to make us all the more terrified of war. And it comes through clearly. And like I said, it helps that the explosion itself is just like the second act for like the big grand set piece, and the rest of the film is trying to stress the point that no, this isn't cool, this is really horrifying. And it really nails that point home. And also, like I said, this film is very fast, has a lot of very quick dialogue. It jumps around a lot, especially in the first act. Like, you go between, Oppenheimer thinking about, how he's going to split the atom, to having concerns about the war, to recognizing the fact that he's Jewish, and, other, and that Jewish people are, kind of not that accepted during the era. And also having like communist leanings, but trying to stress like political war efforts, trying to be aware, but also, having those political intentions kind of not quite evaporate, but kind of like, get pushed into the background the further that he gets into his work. The way that it builds up through there, like where it's just kind of like Oppenheimer gets blinded by progress, and like the most of like the first act and second act is just like going further and further into progress, and the sexual affairs are kind of like a warning sign to him that you might not have the best insight with what you're doing. And then by the time you get to the explosion, it's all of this, for lack of a better term, dealing with the fallout with what comes with being labeled the father of the atomic bomb. And everyone at play here is great. Like the cast list for this is absurd. Like you have Gary Oldman playing the president here for like a small role, but it's great. You have Jack Quaid playing one of like the scientists here. Brief. He's in the film a lot more than Gary Oldman, but he doesn't have as many lines as you might think. Kenneth Branagh as Niels Bohr. You have Matt Damon as military official. You have Casey Affleck, which is a real surprise in this film, and he actually becomes like kind of like a more like the more charismatic scientist, where he's very like critical of Oppenheimer, and there's aspects of him you can agree with, but but like you kind of feel a little bit more for Oppenheimer in this way. Like he plays Boris Posh, who's very like like a little bit critical, but also very weary of the politics that Oppenheimer brings into his work. Also, of course, Emily Blunt as Kitty doing a great job. You have Florence Pugh as Jean. I could go down the whole list. You have Rami Malek. You have so many others. Even I'm surprised to see like James Urbanecki, who few people might know as like Rusty Venture from the Venture Brothers, has a small role in this film as well. Just so many great talents here, and they're all playing their role so perfectly. Just because. I feel like this film embraces something that Christopher Nolan does well, but gets glossed over with a lot of his films, which is he keeps the pacing fast and the dialogue quick and intricate. So, and the thing is, like, it's easy to get lost in Nolan's films when he does this, especially with Tenet. The way, like, it's within his last film, Tenet, the way that he tries to like explain the weird time traversing sci-fi about how you're traveling back in time is very fast and very kind of glossed over, and at some points you just kind of got to go with the flow. And there are a few moments in that with Oppenheimer where they're jumping all over the place, which is probably going to be a little bit tough for some people because it's non-linear as well. Like one moment we could be talking about, Oppenheimer attending a communist party where he's talking about his concerns for Spain and asking how he could get money there. And then before you know it, we've jumped back to we've jumped further in time to like talking with Strauss about the current trial where he's trying to stress that Oppenheimer, might be a communist. And even it gets weird because then we get flashbacks within flashbacks, because even when we go back with Strauss and his footage is in black and white, he recalls something else that happened with Oppenheimer, and that footage is in black and white as well. So kind of like the way that the film is framed, like it kind of feels like it's non-linear and we're getting flashbacks within flashbacks. So it very much demands your attention. But I think I think around like the second act, once you kind of like get used to the flow of it and you're able to keep up with like the quick wit and the fast paced dialogue, it really does click with you, and you kind of and honestly, like for a lot of people are going to be bored if they're just coming to this expecting like, you know, like the typical action and explosions that you get in most Christopher Nolan movies. Fair warning, you will not get that in this film. What you will get, however, is a great political drama that doesn't waste a lot of time here. Like I said, very fast paced, and if you can keep up with it, even like within a few moments where it stumbles in the first act, it really does engage you. And the more that you get engaged, the more you get to see Oppenheimer from all these different angles and consider his character and not like him, but feel like that horror that comes with, you know, everything that he's done in his life. And it not just the atomic bomb, but like everything, you know, his political intentions, the way that his career got away from him, the way that his many relationships failed, the way that he kind of failed as a father. All these aspects are considered so that you have a more complete picture of a character who just unleashed this horrific weapon on the world. And the fact that you feel that weight by the end of that film, in a Christopher Nolan film of all pictures, where usually like he has solid writing and solid themes, but usually you kind of, the action kind of overtakes it. Here, everything that he stages with like, you know, like the courtroom drama aspect and the and like the biographical drama and the dialogue that unfolds is just beautiful to witness in this type of film. And just the way that it hits you hard at certain points with the revelations, the you know, that feeling that there's something you can't control, the aspects of having blood on your hands, and even the way that the sex scenes are filmed, it hits you hard, and in a way that I honestly didn't expect from a Christopher Nolan film. So yeah, it's definitely it's not going to be for everyone, because it's definitely like a departure from the type of films that Nolan usually makes. But it's one that I feel really resonates well and taps into something different, so that it feels like, you know, a Nolan film that's, you know, that's trying something new aside from just, you know, the black and white IMAX footage, which is neat. It was pretty cool to see I did see the film in like, you know, like the film strip, the way that Nolan intended, you know, that he always does. But and honestly, aside from like there's a little bit like the weirdness of like, you know, kind of like I heard the film projector and I could see kind of like the flickering nature of the camera that I kind of didn't miss with like the old film projectors. But like the way that it was filmed, it was pretty cool, and I'm sure it'll probably be like a much different experience when I watch it digitally. But yeah, the way that it stands right now, Oppenheimer is probably Christopher Nolan's most divergent film. And if I'm being honest here, it might end up being my favorite film of his over time. I know that's kind of hard to top The Dark Knight, because it's wonderfully shot and everything. But I dare say, give it enough time, this might actually be my favorite Christopher Nolan film. So yeah, Oppenheimer is going to be playing this weekend. But and I know that a lot of people are doing they're doing the whole big double feature with Barbie and Oppenheimer. Fair warning, if you want the right experience, I would say watch Oppenheimer first and then go watch Barbie, because like it's kind of like the double feature of because it's kind of like the double feature of My Neighbor Totoro and Grave of the Fireflies. They were released at the same time, and they have a similar theme of, you know, kids having fears about the world and, you know, striking out on their own. But there's definitely one you should watch before the other if you don't want to end the evening on a downer note. So, fair warning here, see Oppenheimer first. See it in the afternoon, because it's 3 hours long. It's going to take up a lot of time. And then watch Barbie after that. And I know this is probably the fact that this information is coming late is probably going to be a little bit of dismay for people if they already have like set up Barbie first, then Oppenheimer. But trust me, you're going to want to watch that palate cleanser of Barbie, because the ending of Oppenheimer it hits you like a ton of bricks. You need to be prepared for it. All right. So fair warning. All right. And now a little bit of a brief review. I don't have too much to say on this documentary, but I feel like it should be noted because I really kind of dug it. Okay. So, a little bit of a mini review here. In 3, 2, 1. So, Rock Hudson, All That Heaven Allowed. It's kind of like a heartfelt look back on the life of actor Rock Hudson, an actor who was very prolific, but had to be a closeted homosexual just because he feared that, nobody would accept it, and that if it was revealed, that he'd be torn to shreds. And I feel like a documentary like this is pretty important for coming at his career from this angle. Because it lets you get to understand a little bit more about the actor, not just in his private life, which is actually pretty sincere and charming. Because like all the other guys who kind of like knew Rock both on like a friendly level and kind of like on a sexual level, reveal a lot in this film that kind of like paint him as like a more whole person who didn't, behind closed doors, like he felt like he could be more of himself as opposed to, just acting 24/7 and trying to like, keep all the, all his homosexuality out of the tabloids. Because, the one thing, like, because a lot of people, I feel like if they heard the news that Rock Hudson was closeted gay, the first thing they would say was like, well, why didn't he come out? Like, if they don't have any cultural context. And I feel like this documentary does a decent job painting the era and the concerns that Rock had for that. Which is wonderfully told by just, this is one of those documentaries where it relies entirely on, interviews, both video and audio, of other actors kind of like painting the complete picture here about why Rock felt this way and why he had to cover this up. Because, yeah, like the public perception a lot of people had with Rock Hudson was that, he's this big, heterosexual guy who had roles where, he was seducing women, and, a lot of women love that. And like they try to keep that public perception up, especially including having a marriage in which, it's a little bit questionable, how much like they knew, how much she knew in terms of like if Rock was gay and that this was, going to be a sham marriage, just cover it up. And the thing is, Rock actually had really good reason to cover this up, especially because like one of the aspects that they didn't cover in the film is that, Rock Hudson died of AIDS. And of course, when they were going to reveal that he had AIDS, of course it was going to come out that he was homosexual. And one of the things that they don't address in the film, but I feel like should be stressed, is that when this was revealed, right-wing radio host Rush Limbaugh, who talked a lot about AIDS on the radio at that time, after Rock Hudson's death, referred to AIDS as Rock Hudson's disease, and just mocked the actor and everyone else who was dying of AIDS at the time, like literally saying that gay people deserve this. So there was a lot of like, Rock was right. He was terrified to reveal this because like, really horrible people like Rush Limbaugh would harp on this and would use it against it, which, it was just like the most horrible thing. So there's a mixture of both like anger and and sincerity and poignancy that comes about in this documentary where you feel for Rock. It's not like there's not like a whole lot of like revealing archival footage here. Like there's some behind the scenes photos that they reveal that are that fluctuate between being like cute and concerning, that are pretty interesting, but it's mostly just like relying on like audio and interviews and footage from the era, and a lot of clips from Rock's other films that kind of like paint like the complete picture of the man. But on that level, for that type of film, I do love how it proceeds in a linear fashion, and and like how it doesn't shy away from addressing how Rock felt towards the end of his career, especially when like he was still acting, and so many people were just horrified about what was going on with the AIDS epidemic, that Rock just didn't feel like himself. Like even before he was like like AIDS was like further crippling him, just having like that anxiety hang over him, and and the fact that other actors felt that similar level of anxiety, like especially for when they were working with him on projects, and some of the crew were just because there was hysteria around how AIDS is spread, they were just like they didn't want to be around him. They were horrified of this stuff. So it's it's a good reminder about like how far we've come and how we need to like keep going forward with this, so that someone like Hudson doesn't feel like they need to be in the shadows. Like nowadays, yeah, like it's easier for actors to come out as gay because they're more accepting of it, and like there aren't a lot of like crappy like tabloids that would harp on this and ruin this career if they came out as gay. Like there's still right-wing weirdos, like like in the in the wake of like Rush Limbaugh, there have been really other terrible people who would harp on this, but honestly, they're just garbage people at this point that nobody should really be taking seriously, and barely anyone does outside of that. One would hope. Like I said, I want to be cautious about that because, like, yeah, we've come a long ways, but we need to keep going further, because a talent like Rock Hudson, it felt like he should have been with us a lot longer. It felt like there was a lot more projects that he could have brought about, and even like the film goes into his diaries and addresses how like he feels about his work, and that he might have like suffered with like the quality, like especially like I believe he was on like some soap operas, not quite soap operas, but kind of like like serial dramas on television in the 80s, and you could tell like the way that he describes himself, like he wasn't happy with what he was doing. He didn't like the way that that his work was proceeding on screen, and you can kind of like feel like the pressures and just like the anxiety that comes with trying to like hide the secret and not feeling like yourself. So yeah, like who knows if maybe if he could have been more open, didn't have to hide so much behind closed doors, we might have still had Rock. It's like we should have had him for more years. It would have been great to see him in just like a few more film roles where like he didn't really feel bad about like the work that he was doing. So yeah, it's like especially like if you haven't seen a lot of Rock Hudson films, I've seen like a handful. It was interesting to get this perspective out. Like I knew about like how he died of AIDS and how he was a closeted homosexual, and how like Rush Limbaugh was like shitting all over him. But yeah, like getting more of like the complete picture here, especially from those who knew him best, it paints a very poignant picture of this actor that is definitely worth watching. So Rock Hudson, All That Heaven Allows, is currently playing on Max, or HBO Max, however you want to say it, Yeah. So yeah, that's our stream. It's actually recommendations all around. So let's do a quick recap of the films we reviewed in today's stream. We reviewed Barbie, a surprisingly insightful and mature film based around the popular toy, which does more than just play with all like her accessories and the many dolls and sorts. It still has that imagination and fun and color and music to it, but it goes into areas in addressing gender norms and feminism and Barbie's cultural influence that I honestly didn't expect from the film. It's very much a Greta Gerwig film. We also reviewed Oppenheimer, the Christopher Nolan film about Julius Oppenheimer and how he created the atomic bomb. It hits the ground running, but if you're willing to keep up with the quick pacing and you're in the mood for a good courtroom drama that surrounds, the big giant explosion, it is a very intoxicating experience, and I absolutely was engaged. But be forewarned, I feel like I gotta stress this. It's an IMAX film, and there's a giant explosion that's advertised with it. There's only one massive explosion in it, and it's a courtroom drama. It's a great courtroom drama, though. So if you're in the mood for that, it's perfect. And we also reviewed Rock Hudson, All That Heaven Allowed, which is a sad but insightful and sometimes very charming documentary about the actor who unfortunately died of AIDS and had to live a closeted life of a homosexual. So yeah, all three of those I would recommend. That's Rock Hudson, All That Heaven Allowed. It's currently playing on Max. You can stream it there. And Oppenheimer and Barbie is in theaters this weekend. So, if you like this stream, and if you want more early reviews like Barbie and Oppenheimer, be sure to like and subscribe, because we'll have more reviews up on here as they come out. I will be back in 2 weeks to review a whole bunch of different films, and although I don't know for sure if I'm going to see them, and there's a lot that's coming out I'm going to try to cover. I'm going to see if I can cover The Haunted Mansion, Disney's new film based on the ride, as well as Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem, the latest animated adaptation of my favorite childhood toy. Yeah, as long as we're talking about Barbie and childhood toys, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is my jam. So I'm definitely going to be reviewing that in the next 2 weeks here. So be sure to check out my blog, movieswithmark.com, where I do my written reviews, filminquiry.com as well. In fact, you can go to both sites right now and check out my my review of Barbie. Will be up there. Oppenheimer, I will try to get the review out soon on that platform as well. And the one I do on Film Inquiry will actually be picked up by Rotten Tomatoes as well. So yeah, I'll be back in 2 weeks, and we'll talk about even more films. So yeah, until next time, have a great one. Have a great time at the theaters this summer.